You're listening to Orange Pulp. We've got a lot on the docket, joined by Zachary Francis, Timothy Ferguson.
Good to be back.
I'm
It's
Brian
been a while.
Armstrong. It has been about a week and a half.
No, it's
like
been over
more.
a week because we had spring break last week.
That's true. I forgot about that, and we all left. Yep. It's all spring break went by too
Almost
fast.
3 weeks. 3 weeks. It felt like a month.
It's been that wow.
Well, you think? Yeah, it's been that long.
Wow.
Yeah, something like that.
America's been waiting for Brian's voice.
We've got a lot on the docket. We've got March Madness, both men and women's. We've got lacrosse for both genders. We got MLB preview, a variety of teams talking about national stories, LeBron being a teenage girl on Instagram, and a whole lot more. First, we're going to start with the men's basketball argument on whether or not they should have made it into the tournament. Definite argument on if they should have been a 10 seed. All of that is in the past, and they did what they wanted with the seed, and they beat Dayton, and then they got a lucky draw with Michigan State getting upset by Middle Tennessee, and then they blew out Middle Tennessee. Zach,
Middle
what did you
Tennessee
take? Middle Tennessee.
The Blue Raiders, which we all learned after.
I
they
mean,
won
it
what
was
they
it was
were.
one of those games that everybody was just like, "Oh, Michigan State moved them on to the Final Four."
Final Four.
National champion.
I had them in the finals, losing in the finals, but still I had them in the finals.
So I mean, just because I like to do this, I make out several brackets every year. There were two.
So no integrity on your.
No, I mean, I have one that I'm like, this is the one that I'm submitting. But then I was like, oh, well, yeah, sure. What about if I have Vanderbilt win? How is that going to work out? So, because then it's like they've got to play like a 16 seed in the championship.
Yes.
But, yeah, so I had Michigan State in a couple of my brackets. But, yeah. I saw a GIF pretty soon after it, and it was just Stewie from Family Guy sitting in a sandbox, and he's just rocking back and forth, and it says, "This is what everybody that picked Michigan State to win the national championship looks like right now." Nobody saw it coming.
No, and I was actually visiting with a friend from work that I hadn't gotten to see in a while, so we flip over the game, and we're watching. I'm just like, this makes no sense. I don't understand college basketball anymore. Tim, what did you think? We'll talk about Syracuse in a bit, but since we're on just the craziness of Michigan State losing, what did you take of that?
Well, I'm not shocked anymore. A few years back, remember when Albany made the tournament as a 15 seed, and they played Duke in Philadelphia, and they lost. But in the nightcap, I was at the Florida Gulf Coast game when they beat Georgetown.
Whoa!
So yeah, I witnessed
baby.
Dunk City when it really became Dunk City. So I'm not really shocked anymore. Certainly, a 15 over a 2 is not as likely as some of the other matchups. It's funny to see of course, Middle Tennessee was not in the original Conference USA, but it's funny to see how the Conference USA is not really what it once was either. It's like a mid-major at best.
Suck.
Yeah, it's not.
My conference is made of mediocrity.
I mean, they were fleeced. Obviously, the Big East fleeced them a little bit. The ACC fleeced them. The Americans. So they don't have much left. So yeah, I mean, it certainly was a big upset, but I'm still really not shocked year in and year out anymore because this just happens now. You could almost throw the seedings out sometimes in a lot of games.
We'll have a lot more to talk about that, but getting into Syracuse men's basketball, beating Dayton, I actually figured that one would happen. Definitely didn't expect them to go against Middle Tennessee, but once that happened, I figured Middle Tennessee just had the win of its career.
I had Syracuse losing to Dayton in the first round.
I had Syracuse winning against Dayton and then losing against Michigan State. So, and Tim, where did you have it?
Well, this is probably going to make me a hashtag social outcast, Zachary. That's a WWE reference.
Please don't say you don't do a bracket.
The last 3 years I have not, if you can believe that. Because I don't know why I did this, but I just kind of was like, I'm just going to sit back and watch. And it takes the pressure off. I'm not saying I'll never do one again. It's not one of those deals where like I had this epiphany, I'm never going to do one again. However, though, if you're going to ask me, I probably would have had Syracuse losing. I just felt like they didn't belong in. Dayton was the best team in the Atlantic 10. That's not a bad conference. So if I was going to pick, I wouldn't have picked Syracuse to win that game.
Now, coming up, they have Gonzaga. And Gonzaga is a good team that you can argue got underseeded. Last year, got the 1 seed, almost lost in the first round, ended up losing in the second round. Or 2 years ago, sorry, 2 years ago. And fun fact, one of the guys in my league who actually ended up winning the league predicted Gonzaga being the first ever 1 seed to lose, and was so close, and he would have just bragged about it forever. But it almost feels like the pressure's off of them, and Gonzaga matches up very well with Syracuse.
They do. Actually, so I know that I've told Tim about this, and I think I've told you, Brian, but I had my mom fill out a bracket.
Yes, I love...
She had some Catholic schools going deep.
She did. She had Xavier as a Final Four pick.
Squirtle had...
Sorry, Mom. That didn't work out.
Squirtle had Oklahoma State, the Beavers, winning it all. They lost in the first round.
Gary Payton Jr., right? I don't know where that was intended to go, but
that's really all I had to go. But just the fun of brackets. But continue.
Yeah. So my mom had the national championship game of Duke on one side,
Yes.
Gonzaga on the other, with the Zags winning the national championship. Actually, fun fact on ESPN, of the several that I filled out,
several.
One of them is also Chelsea's.
Maybe
Hers
odds
is
be ever.
hers is not doing well at all. But yeah, my mom's is doing the best.
Very fun.
We're halfway through the Sweet 16, and my mom's is doing the best.
My girlfriend's dad was in first. Well, he still technically is in first, but that'll drop pretty soon. But he had Duke winning the national title over Syracuse. So
It's going to be tough
Why?
to keep that alive right now. Keep that alive.
But more of the brackets, kind of like your fantasy football team or your golf game. No one cares. We had a little fun with it. But, Tim, what do you see in the matchup for Syracuse versus Gonzaga?
Well, all three of us have watched a lot of Syracuse this year, and I think the biggest thing for the Orange, or the Orange, as we've learned them to be called by some of our people and our classmates and whatnot. But
That's not the name of our show.
exactly. But they struggle defending the high post because they always leave that area open, and they struggle against the lob and the short corner. I haven't heard of Gonzaga being a great three-point shooting team. I think they were really guard-laden in past years, and so they had good shooters, good point guards, good off guards. But with Kyle Wiltshire and with Sabonis, I think this presents major problems for Syracuse. I'm not saying they're going to lose.
Sabonis is going to tear the Orange up.
I think he can, depending upon where they place him. Now, if you're a team like Gonzaga that probably didn't see a lot of zone in the West Coast Conference or any of the teams they played all year, it's going to be a struggle to prep for that. But on the same token, I feel like these two, I don't want to say bigs because they're kind of like more forwards, not really centers. I think they can shred the zone in certain areas, so it'll be interesting to see their game plan.
Now, I know we've been away for a while, and obviously the selection committee and the league bracket and everything else happening with that. But when Syracuse got the 10 seed, what was your first thought?
They don't deserve it. That was the first thought that ran through my mind. I didn't think that they should have made the tournament.
Why?
Because of one loss. When you lose to St. John's, there is no way you should have been in the tournament.
So you're all about the Doug Gottlieb right there when he goes, any team that lost to St. John's should not be in this.
Oh, I agreed. I agreed 100%. And, I mean, that has not been a popular opinion around here, but I 100% agreed with that because I think even though it was Hop that was the coach then, Boeheim, it was, the second game that Boeheim wasn't on the bench?
Yes.
It was still such a bad loss, especially when you consider that they lost to Incarnate Wood in, their next game. So, I mean, it's just like they didn't deserve it, in my opinion. And I know that somebody's going to make the argument that it's not whether you deserve it, but it's how your resume stacks up. I think in a little bit is, do you deserve it?
Tim, what was your thought?
I thought that really a few things. Number one, the committee, you can see year in and year out, struggles to seed teams. They just don't seem to know where to put people. I thought Syracuse should have been a play-in game in Dayton at best.
Agreed.
Or a first four. I'm sorry, I don't want to upset the
four.
committee, whatever the heck they call that. So, there was that situation. And, when I grew up, I learned that almost was only good like in horseshoes or hand grenades.
Yeah.
And it seems like Syracuse had a lot of almosts. Like they didn't lose that badly to North Carolina. They didn't lose that badly to Clemson that was hot at the time, or a couple other teams. And then when they beat Notre Dame, they didn't have their best player.
Exactly.
So
I mean, that's what I think they got in on, is the almost.
And I think another thing too, and this is for like if we wanted to do one podcast just solely on this, you wonder if the NCAA was like, well, we already punished them, and we don't want Boeheim to be ornery, so we're going to let these guys
Boeheim's
sneak in.
going to be ornery
He's gonna be
anyways.
no matter what, so it doesn't matter. But I often thought maybe there was some slight tie into that we'll never know the answer to. Maybe that's why the bracket got leaked, because someone in the committee got so pissed that they got in, they walked out and then just submitted the bracket online for everybody to see.
There's a whole bunch of conversation that it's too long for what we have to talk about the leaked part of it. But with Syracuse getting in, it's the argument of, do you want to do mediocrity in a big conference or top level at a small conference? Couldn't you make the argument that if Syracuse was in one of the smaller conferences, not the Power Five, that they would have won that smaller conference, so they would have made it in that way?
Well, you can make a lot of those comparisons. You can try to do that kind of stuff, but the fact of the matter is they're in the ACC. So, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I don't know if we can reward. I mean, I'm not saying you put Podunk State in just because, like, if I'm going to make the analogy, like Monmouth won 29 games. I don't know. Maybe Monmouth should have gotten in. Maybe they should have gotten in. And I would have supported that. I definitely would have supported that. But it's apples and oranges sometimes when you compare these bigger conference schools and their regular season schedule based on some of these other schools who try to schedule hard. Or how about St. Mary's, who did not schedule very well this year because they knew they were young and they weren't going to be that good. They had a great year. They lose in the West Coast Conference Final. They're not in the tournament.
You're right.
There's some of the it's hard to compare, I think, but.
Now, the thing that drives me up a wall, because I also argue that Syracuse shouldn't have made it, I was playing devil's advocate on the couldn't you put them in a different, but on my own personal viewpoint on it, they shouldn't have made the tournament because they lost too many games. They lost too many games they shouldn't have. You can't lose 3 times to Pitt. I know Pitt got into the tournament, but we saw how easily they got bounced. When your marquee win is against Duke, when honestly they probably should have lost to UNC Wilmington. And in that
I disagree with that, but keep going.
They didn't look good, but here's the biggest thing. When Jim Boeheim looks at everybody like they're an idiot and that there was a tragedy of anyone who said they shouldn't have made it, and you must not watch college basketball, people watch a lot of college basketball that are on those selection committees, and Syracuse for most of the season was very inconsistent and not very good at times.
I mean, the way that I look at it, I know that they say that they pay special attention to a couple of different things. I know that they say that 20 wins is not a benchmark to get in anymore for an at-large team. I know that they say 500 is not a benchmark to get in 500 in conference, is not a benchmark to get in. But it should be. If you can't go 500 in your conference, you do not deserve to win a national championship. Because that means that say you play 18 games and you play just going out on the ACC, you play like 4 teams once, 4 teams twice, or I can't remember how exactly it works out. But you lost in Syracuse's case. You lost 10 games
and 5 of your last 6.
There is no way that if you're paying attention to those last 7 or so games and your conference record, that makes you one of the best 64 teams in the country.
You're listening to Orange Pulp, and I think we can wrap it up by we all want to care about number 1 and be a little selfish. It gives us something to watch and root for tonight, and more importantly, it gets the 2 of the 3 of us, Zach and I, out of class on Monday. So there's a benefit in there. You're listening to Orange Pulp.
Oh, class.
We don't have our sports reporting class because Steve's in Chicago.
That's right.
You're listening to Orange Pulp. Previously in the podcast, we were talking about men's basketball. Now we'll flip over to the women's side of things. A win over Army. I combined Albany and Army to make Army.
Well, you've just had a dishonorable discharge right there. So. They're not letting you in.
I don't think they would let me into a service academy ever. They'd take one look at me and be like, nope. But they won over Army, and then they won over a team that someone, not to say any names, Timothy Ferguson, that you have a connection with. Who was that?
I do. The Great Danes.
It was not my NC State Wolfpack.
Of Albany.
We were robbed of not making it into the women's tournament.
Well, I think
We certainly were robbed into making the men's.
We deserved not to be in that tournament. Hell of a game against
you
Duke in the
declined
second
your
round.
invite, didn't you, to this
Las Vegas 16,
the Las Vegas 16,
which turned into the Las Vegas 8 because they couldn't get teams to agree to play.
LSU. But back onto the women's basketball. Sorry for that, but I had to do a shot. You saw that game up and close.
Yeah, but it was gravy, though, too, because, I just deflect a little bit. Albany got its first win against Florida, their first NCAA tournament win in program history.
Huge win.
Huge win. And, I said to everybody that I could possibly tell that I was on the staff there 10 years ago when we couldn't even win 5 games. So I think that Albany losing was not devastating for me as much as a fan. But it was a tough go of it for Syracuse for the first maybe 3 quarters of the first half. Albany had the lead early. No one was really scoring. But I think, this Syracuse team, I don't want to predict how they're going to play against South Carolina.
Well, you're going to have to.
But I'm going to have to.
Second.
But I think that they're really becoming one of the elite teams. When I say elite, I don't mean the elite of the elite. We know who those couple teams are.
UConn.
But if you really get into that next tier, maybe 5 through 10 or 5 through 12, Syracuse is right in the conversation. So
5 through 12 is still elite?
I think it's elite, but it's not God.
Okay.
UConn, Notre Dame, South Carolina. That's like God and Peter and the apostles. And then on Good Friday, I'm telling you this.
This biblical breakdown was brought to you by. We're all going to hell.
So teams 5 through 12 are just kind of like really good saints, but they're not good enough to beat God. So, it's
the Last Supper deal has.
That's right. I'm telling you.
This would be a great time for a plug for like if you had a spot to read.
Yes.
This podcast is brought to you by St. Anne's Church in Manlius, New York, and masses are at 8:30 and 10 o'clock on Sundays. So.
Save yourself because we won't.
Well, it is Easter weekend, so somebody's got to save themselves. So.
Yes, it is. It is Good Friday. Now we're just over an hour away from the opening tip for Syracuse versus South Carolina. How do you see that game going?
I think the Orange got a big break.
South Carolina is a very good program. This year.
They are a great program, but you're right, down this year. Still got that number 1 seed, but I think the huge break comes because it's being played in South Dakota.
Yes,
and not Columbia, South Carolina. So I think that is so big for the Orange. And they're on a roll right now. The only loss out of their last 12, I think it is by 11 to Notre Dame in the ACC championship.
Right, and that's the key word, ACC championship game, playing them and losing by 11. Earlier in the year, they got slaughtered by them in Notre Dame, so that was great improvement, great growth.
In Notre Dame? In South Bend.
In South Bend, that's right. Well, in Notre Dame's arena. They're Catholic, too.
So I think that's...
Pause on that. How far does your mom have Notre Dame going? Because
I don't know.
She had the Catholic schools just running this.
I actually don't remember. Let me look that up.
Okay, but while he's doing that, Tim, where do you see them matching up against South Carolina?
Well, I'll tell you that if I stepped out on the court for Syracuse, the person that I fear the most in South Carolina is their head coach, Dawn Staley. I mean, I remember her as a player, and I see her now as a coach and how fiery she is and forceful she is and how she motivates that team. I think Syracuse puts up a good showing for, let's say, the first half, maybe early second half, and I see South Carolina probably pulling away by about 15. I don't think they're going to murder the Orange because I think the Orange are a much better team. They've got to answer Alexis Peterson, Brittany Sykes. They've got things they got to think about too, but I think South Carolina pulls away.
What do you think about Breonna Butler?
My mom had Notre Dame.
Yeah, good change of topic right there.
My mom in the men's bracket had Notre Dame losing in the Sweet 16.
Oh.
So she's still...
to Xavier, but but she got that one right.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way about Butler. Okay, I'm just gonna say it right now. I'm kind of like moving here, like I'm Coach Q, moving my head around as I'm talking.
Okay,
you're not dressed nearly as nicely.
It's not even close. Not even close.
We gotta take just a detour for half a second. How popped was that collar? against
Look,
University of
Q's
Albany.
got everything on point. I mean,
Yes.
he's got the clothes on point. Even his handshake is like perfect. I don't know.
Yes.
There's something about this man. He touches everything and it's gold.
I thought we came out very, very well today, and just look at my wardrobe.
I understood way too many of those words.
In the wardrobe bracket, he is better than UConn, I think,
Yes.
in the wardrobe bracket. Him and Jay Wright one-on-one in the championship of wardrobes, I think, would be pretty
We
intense.
just come in a one. Why is Dove's men care not
Yeah,
guy Coach
yeah,
Q?
Q's got to get on that Dove men's care thing, for sure. He's better than JT3, John Thompson III, talking about Bulldogs.
We got you all about Butler. Continue on.
What kind of bulldog is it? Is it an English bulldog? Is it
Here's the deal with Butler. I'm just going to be honest. Look, you can't take anything away from her statistical career. Her shot selection could be some of the worst that I've seen. Now, I understand the theory.
It's a little iffy.
I understand the theory. Points per possession, they're very much into that. Coach Q and assistant coach Von Reed is very much into that. But there are times when a three-pointer is unwarranted in a particular situation. She bricks some shots as badly as she makes shots look so great. And I think she's an Achilles heel for them sometimes offensively. If she's on, she's on. But the last two games against Army and Albany, she was not on. Now, maybe that's a good sign. She played poorly, and now she turns around and plays great. I don't know. But she's not the reason why they go.
You're listening to Orange Pulp. Coming up next, SU lacrosse, both men and women's. We'll see if this show can go any more off the rails. You're listening to Orange Pulp. You're listening to Orange Pulp. We got SU men's lacrosse. Recent loss to Johns Hopkins. Hopkins, obviously, one of those very good programs as well. Syracuse moved back in the ranking from 3 to 5.
You know what my first lacrosse memory is? It's Johns Hopkins beating Duke in the national championship game, like 7 or 8 years ago. That was the first time that I watched lacrosse.
That was on the heels of the scandal period, too, right? I mean, that was
It was like the year before.
the year before. Okay.
Yeah, when Duke lost in the finals, yeah, when they were expected to repeat, and then how that whole Duke debacle unfolded. Tim, where do you see just the guys' lacrosse team going? And obviously they're one of the premier programs, but slipping back just a tinge?
You know, I think the last couple of years, I feel like they've slipped back a little bit, even seeding-wise when it comes to the tournament. I think only 16 teams make the men's lacrosse NCAA tournament.
Right.
There might be a couple play-ins, but I think 16. But anyways, they've slipped a little bit, and I think the margin of error is kind of difficult because you don't play that many games. It's not much greater than a football schedule. So if you lose, you can drop in the polls. I watched a little bit of the Johns Hopkins game, actually. I was out and saw some of it, and it's an OT game. Those things can go either way. It's a sudden death OT sport, so you can't take anything away from Syracuse for the effort. But they got to make sure they win the ACC, and I think with those games coming up, Duke, Notre Dame, North Carolina a little bit later.
There's no break in the schedule. Number 11 Duke on Saturday, home against number 2 Notre Dame next Saturday, so they don't have a break at all in the action.
I'll be covering that the game against Notre Dame.
It'd be nice if there was a good crowd for that. I mean, I don't think
I
people
hope so.
realize the magnitude of that game.
I know
They
one
better-
person will be in the crowd. My sister will be there.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. Chelsea,
Tim, we got a person to introduce you to.
actually, Tim's picking her up from the airport.
Ooh.
I am, yeah. So
She's very excited about meeting you.
we'll get her. She is?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've already met. We met
That's right,
in the
that's
summer.
right,
Yeah.
that's right.
Going to the
Leslie was there for that. He might have met her too.
Can we make that match and have it happen? Leslie and Chelsea?
No.
Oh, no, probably not a good idea.
We're going to cut that, by the way. We're cutting that, by the way.
So,
But the big thing here is what can they gain from just the quick, hard, just back-to-back schedule, the increase, and what player can stand out and just catapult themselves going on?
I think the thing about ACC lacrosse, it's very similar to ACC basketball. It is the best conference in America.
it's almost like one of the only ones too.
Yeah, it's kind of the only
But
one in
that
America.
could make it the best.
But
though.
yeah.
It is a regionalized sport.
Yes, but I think when you look at it, somebody definitely has to step up. And I think that's going to end up being Dylan Donahue, just because he's simply one of the best players in America. And when you're one of the best and your team's struggling, you got to put the team on your back sometimes. Put the team on your back.
But it could be gut check time because Syracuse is undefeated. Maybe they needed a little, a game that didn't quite go their way so they could refocus and say, hey, this ACC conference is just about every team is ranked. And it's not an easy thing to just roll through. So the Johns Hopkins loss could be somewhat of a blessing in disguise in their season, at least at this point.
It could be because a lot of times it's sort of weird. Lacrosse is one of those sports that if you go into the NCAA tournament undefeated, you're not going to win.
Yeah.
On the other side, for women's, they've kind of had a poor run of form, just going 3-3 in their last 6 games. And our Boston College representative isn't here to celebrate the 13-8 win
by the Eagles.
But they're starting to fall down. They've only dropped to 6, which is surprising that they haven't dropped more. But they're going to be against Notre Dame, which Notre Dame obviously ranked number 4 in the country. Very good team.
Well, when you look at a couple of their losses that they have, they lost to Florida here at the Carrier Dome.
Yes.
Overtime game.
It's and the questionable thing with the goalkeeper and everything.
Yeah. So, I mean, you look at that loss and you're like, okay, well, that was just a really, really unfortunate situation. And every team is going to have ups and downs in their season. Unfortunately, in lacrosse, because it's such a small tournament, if you get a number of losses and the polling, whoever makes the polls, and they think that you're not that great of a team, they can drop you out of there and you're not in the polls anymore. Right. And so it's sort of one of those sports. If you're not in the final poll, you're not getting in.
Yeah, and your draw could be really difficult too. I mean, if you go on a situation where you lose a bunch, but you were because they were in the top 3 to start the season,
got up to number 2.
Then you're down to 8-9. You might be playing that 1 seed early, and but I think if you look a little bit at their schedule, so they lose to Florida at home, I think was an odd game. Wasn't it like a noon game or something?
It was like a noon game on a Tuesday.
Yeah, it was a weird time. And then they had to go to Virginia, even though they won. Then they came back home to Maryland. Then
they lost that one, right?
They lost that one. Then they were at Harvard on a Wednesday, and then 3 days later at Boston College. Now,
That's
I don't know
the thing.
if
This team is playing so many games.
Yeah, and I don't know if they stayed in the Boston area because was it school break when they were there?
Yeah, it was spring break.
So maybe they were able to stay in the area for a couple of days and not have to travel back and forth. But they played all those home games up front, and now you're on the road, and now you got to prove yourself how good you really are.
Yeah.
And comes down to things like face-offs and ground balls and those things that could be why you win or lose.
You're listening to Orange Pulp. Coming up next, MLB previews. And we've got a plethora of teams, and if you listen to the last time we talked about baseball, we better not go as long. You're listening to Orange Pulp. You're listening to Orange Pulp here with Tim, Zach, and myself.
Yep.
We'll start in the AL and go with...
We're going to do the Central today, both
going
leagues.
In the middle.
In the middle.
Detroit Tigers, Tim, off the top.
Well, I look at the Tigers, and obviously their GM, Dave Dombrowski, is now with the Red Sox, and he did a great job putting together some World Series-like talent, and they went to a few
Contenders.
World Series. They lost to the Cardinals, they lost to the San Francisco Giants. I think they always seem to, at least I say always, I remember time periods, and you guys probably do too, when the Tigers were putrid. I mean, they couldn't win a freaking game.
They lost 116 games one year?
They were at the cellar of all cellars in the Central Division. But I'm looking at their roster. Okay, you got Justin Upton. He finds another team to play on this year in left field.
Still overpaid.
J.D. Martinez in right. J.D.'s got a good bat.
Didn't he play for the Red Sox?
JD?
No,
that was J.D. Drew.
Victor Martinez played for the Red Sox, and he's their DH, and he's back, and it seems to be healthy. You got Cabrera, best hitter in the game. I hope it never comes out that he was a steroid user because he's a heck of a hitter. Actually, quick backstory on Miguel Cabrera, got his career start in Utica for the Utica Blue Sox in one of their last years as a team when he was in the Marlins organization. So I saw Miggy as a catcher before he was an infielder.
And another the bottle down?
Probably.
Yeah, he still had the bottle in his hand.
He was drinking hard at some Utica establishment. So
just another quick thing about Miggy, played for the Carolina Mudcats.
They were in the Marlins organization?
They were in the Marlins organization.
Is that like a long season A or a double A situation?
They were double A at that point.
Double A at that time.
And I was talking to somebody while I was there, and they said, yeah, he was here for 2 weeks, Best 2 weeks of baseball I've ever seen.
I'm sure the guy has so much natural talent.
And I mean, when other players stop to watch you to hit because it's just different, that's how you can see how good he is.
You know what? He reminds me in a lot of ways of Manny Ramirez, but with even being a better average hitter. I mean, Manny could hit for average too.
And not a head case.
Right, exactly. At least now at this point.
Well, that's just Miggy being Miggy.
That's right. That's right. So just going around a little bit too, they've got Jose Iglesias, who's become a better hitter since he left the Red Sox. Ian Kinsler great at second, but I think the rotation is what people are going to talk about the most. Bringing in Jordan Zimmerman from the Washington Nationals. I don't know how great Jordan Zimmerman is. He's been a really good player for the Nats, but there was all this talk when he's a free agent, the money he's going to get and where he's going to land, and he landed here in Detroit. So you still have him, Anibal Sanchez. The bullpen, I'm not really sure. Their closer it looks like Francisco Rodriguez. I wouldn't trust him to close a game anywhere. He can throw. He's a flamethrower.
Yeah,
but
still has the record for most saves in a season.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember seeing him some of those Mets days, and he scared me. So, I guess kind of the look with the Tigers is it's going to be tough to overtake Kansas City, but I see them. They could be a team that could win around 90 games if they hit the ball. So that'll be interesting to see.
Coming up, I have the Kansas City Royals, and they're a team, yes, they've won the World Series. They've been in the World Series the last 2 years, and I still don't understand their team. Am I wrong for that? But, I mean, you look at their players, and they have good, solid players. It's one of those where the unit as a whole is better than the individuals. But you have a catcher, you have Salvador Perez, who is a very good pitcher. I wouldn't put him quite up to Buster Posey, Yadier Molina, but I would say
he's an all-star. He's been an all-star the last few years.
Right behind him, I would put right.
Heart and soul guy.
And then, you have Lorenzo Cain pitching, which at 29 came onto the scene. But at 29, he came onto the scene. Now, I know baseball players develop usually later than other players, but for that to be your marquee hit on the beginning, it just seems strange to me. Shortstops, you have decent one in Elsaldes Escobar. But
I think you got to look at it, Brian, as Kansas City being like the Spurs.
Yes.
I know the Spurs have Tim Duncan. They have Tony Parker. They have, but you could say, hey, well, they got some all-stars too. They got Moustakas. They've got Hosmer, guys that are all-stars. But again, some of the parts, putting it together.
Almost the entire team was an all-star team because of that internet catch and the voting and everyone's trying to.
But I think that's what makes this Royals team so good and just so interesting to watch is because you look at them on paper and you say, oh, this shouldn't be that great of a team. But then you watch it and the way that they play team baseball.
My question is, can their offense keep up? Yes, their pitching staff is very good, and obviously once you make in the playoffs, pitching wins. But can their offensive production stay up? And I just don't see it happening. I mean, I guess I wouldn't have seen it happening last year too, but
I think they're similar to some of those Yankees teams in the 90s. Some of those teams, they brought in like a Cecil Fielder or Ruben Sierra to be a DH, but you had gritty guys hitting the ball. O'Neill, Jeter, Tino Martinez. Yeah, they could hit for power in a small Yankee stadium, but they grind it out at bats. And I think that's what you see with this Royals team. Make these other teams go up in their pitch counts. And then, Brian, as you mentioned about the pitching, you bring Wade Davis in the eighth. He's not the closer, but he's the middle guy. At 6-7 innings tops, you better get to the Royals.
Their backup is their bullpen is definitely set up because they have built it from the back. And you look at their team and you go, okay, 70 wins, and then you look at them and go, wait, they're the Royals, 85, 90. It's just how it's going to go. So I would put the over around 88 games.
Yeah, and remember, all of those teams have to play each other 19 times.
Yes.
So some critical series are going to determine that. It could be an August series.
And they're in a very winnable division.
Yeah, anybody can win that division any year.
Zach, you've got the Sox.
The what Sox?
The Red Sox.
That's right.
The white ones.
Yep, we've got the White Sox. And, looking at this team on paper, they should be a good team. But then when they get out there on the field, you're going to realize, they're old.
Well, they're certainly old because they just cut their youngest player.
Yeah.
Adam LaRoche's son. They had a chance to really make that mean average of their roster go down, like 8 years old to 35, and now they cut.
And I mean, that's something that I'll get to.
Go talk about the whole team, and we'll get on the
we'll get back to Adam LaRoche. But I mean, you look at this team, and I mean, their biggest acquisition of the offseason was obviously Todd Frazier, getting him from the Reds. He's going to be a great power third baseman. Won the home run derby last year, so maybe he'll be good on.
So they got Frazier, huh?
Yes.
Boy, that really helps him out a lot.
I mean, that does help him out because that really helps him out on the corners. Frazier, he's a good corner third baseman defensively.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've got
Abreu at first.
Corner. So look at the power there just on the corners. Their middle infield, that's a little shaky. Tyler Saladino. Have you ever heard of him?
No, he's second base probably, right?
He's their shortstop.
What about Alexei?
He is on the Padres this year, I think.
Is he really?
Yeah, he changed teams. Their second baseman, Brett Laurie.
Brett Laurie, he's a gritty guy too. I remember how sad he was to leave the Blue Jays. He's had a chip on his shoulder. He didn't have the right role, I don't think, with Oakland last year. So it could be a good year for Brett.
Yeah. And then you look at their outfield. They've got Adam Eaton in center, and Melky Cabrera out in left.
Man.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of Melky, even though he did take a few roids.
There, yeah.
But then what I'm really intrigued about is the top two in their starting pitching. Chris Sale. And NC State product, Carlos Rodon.
Oh, yeah. Did they get him from anyone, or was he a farm
He was
hand?
the number 3 overall pick
by the White Sox
2 years ago.
Okay.
He made his major league debut just over a year after he was drafted.
That doesn't happen much.
It's starting to happen.
No, it wasn't
more and more
even a
in
year
baseball.
after he was drafted.
It's starting to happen more and more in baseball with people plugging him up and moving him up there, but it did take a while to get to that point.
Yeah, he was a 14th round pick by the Brewers coming out of high school. Mm-hmm. He said, I can do better than that. Yeah. Jumped up to number 3. He was possibly a number 1 overall pick. So,
you can do better than that and get a signing bonus, too. So
yeah. And I had a class with him. He was a nice enough guy.
Now the fun conversation we've all been waiting for.
Adam
can
LaRoche.
I just interject this before Adam LaRoche? I'm sorry. I just want to real quick. The biggest acquisition of the White Sox all year was Newhouse alum Jason Benetti as the play-by-play man, replacing Hawk Harrelson, who made me hate the White Sox more than the Yankees. I hated the White Sox every time I watched their games.
I could not stand him.
But Jason, I've listened to him a little bit when the White Sox feed's been on MLB. He's doing a great job. He's going to be awesome. It sounds like Sean McDonough's doing the White Sox games because their voices are similar.
That's awesome. And I'll go ahead and give the over-under for the White Sox. I'm going to go 75 games. Because, I mean, you look at the team.
Under.
You look at the team on paper and you say, no, it could be a good team.
They can hit,
but they can't pitch.
Yeah.
Now,
once you get past the first 2 in the rotation, sorry.
LaRoche.
So I'm going to go ahead and make this stance. I agree with Adam LaRoche. I think even in a sport where you're on the road that much, family still comes first.
Okay.
And I mean, you've got to say,
if he wants to retire,
let me make this argument before you jump in.
And I'm the middleman, by the way.
I'm actually on the middle, and
you've got to say he only had maybe 2 years left.
Yes, and he even said he was thinking of retiring, and he was probably going to retire at the end of this year, and this just kind of tipped it over. If LaRoche wants to retire to spend more time with his family, that's awesome, no problem. I have 0 issues with it. However, where I have to say is I'm on the White Sox side, being you can't bring your kid every day. It's yes, your kid should be allowed to come to the ballpark, but it should be a happy, special day to go to the park. And I'm all for come in. And when I first read the headline, this is bad for the White Sox. How can you not let your kid? And then you start reading, almost every single day the kid goes to the park, and you look at the number of games and you're like, does this kid even go to school? I get that baseball is mostly over the summer, and it's not like they're going too far into the playoffs, so it's not like he's going to miss any school in September. But the beginning of the season, September, October, end of September, beginning of October, all of October. But he's never going to miss any school in October, and the start of playoffs in September being, why is he there every single day? And, okay, right or wrong, at the kid's age, someone's going to have a bad game and going to start cursing up a storm. and then he's got to go, and then he's got to feel bad because he swore in front of a 14-year-old kid because of flipping a table or whatnot. Then there's going to be a time that a coach is just going to, off a 7-game losing streak, going to want to rip into you, rip into the team, and words are going to go flying. Dirty jokes happen and the locker room is one of the most inappropriate places to be. And having a kid in there, and when it's in there every single day, it just becomes too much. Now, LaRoche is not wrong for retiring and wanting to spend time with his kids. I will never begrudge that of anyone. I love that one of my parents were always at a game with me. But the thing is, every single day at the stadium, when we get jobs and we get kids, we can't bring our kid to work every single day because it's just not the place for it. There's a reason why it's bring your kid to work day, not year.
Let me just interject this quick. I think during spring training,
spring training,
depending upon how players take it, some take them seriously, some don't. I think you could do it for the whole spring training period. We don't know.
You know who doesn't take spring training seriously?
Who?
Yoenis Cespedes. Did you see that inside the park homer he gave up because he just didn't want to throw the ball?
I'm talking the whole season as a whole being things. And spring training, open it up. And I'm even saying through the season, have kids randomly come into the ballpark. It's one of those things that's fun. It's the everyday aspect that's ridiculous.
Yeah, they probably could have pulled him aside at the end and just said, Adam, hey, as the season starts, maybe just selected homestands. You bring your son. Obviously, you're not going to bring him on the road unless you have to.
He was doing that.
But he was doing that. So there could be, but we don't know, though, too. There could be some undisclosed. I don't want to over-speculate, but who knows? There could be some family issues. There could be some medical issues that were not talked about. I don't think anybody would just bring their kid just for the sake of bringing their kid
He did it last year with the White Sox. He did it earlier with the Nationals. If, God forbid, say the wife died and his mom died, and that's terrible.
I think we would have heard about
that. If you would have heard that story and saying, okay, he just doesn't know, and he's like, I can't. He's going through this hard time, and we want to connect on that. I would have been the first to go, bravo. But in a situation like this, where it's yes, you want to spend time with your kid, but there is a line, and I think how often he was at the park crossed that line.
Right, and if he had gotten hurt being around a drill just by one of the players on the team would not only be mad but probably feel horrible, and then there'd be some internal strife because of those situations. So yeah, there's a lot of things that can happen with this that make it weird. But then if he becomes Ken Griffey Jr., then they're going to regret it. So.
They will.
Anything more on that?
I stand behind him.
I'm fine with LaRoche retiring. It's not a problem in that world. But my big thing is...
I think that I think that the organization is keeping something back for, what exactly their reasoning is, or there was something else that was going on there. I don't think it was only the kid thing.
If more comes out, then I can readjust. But the information I have at hand right now, I just honestly...
I don't remember who it was, but I heard one of the players say there's more to this story.
Who knows? We'll find out more on that.
We spent more time on the White Sox than anybody.
We got to move this along because we know how long this takes, and we might table the NL depending on how it goes.
No, we're not tabling it. We haven't
been
been around in a while. We might do a long pod today. Where the heck are you going? Nowhere.
Okay. I was just trying to make the baseball go faster. Tim?
People love baseball. It's America's pastime.
No, switch it over. I'm done with it because we made that little swap early, Reds for Indians, so
Gotcha.
we're going to the old Indians guy.
Okay, so we've got the Indians. Go.
The Cleveland Indians. So this is my sleeper World Series pick.
Okay. Weren't they last year for Sports Illustrated too? I
think they were last year. But, SI is not going to pick them 2 years in a row.
That's right.
So, right. I'm going to go with the Indians as my sleeper World Series pick, or at least playoff pick, because of the young talent that they have. They've got Francisco Lindor, which, behind Carlos Carrasco, could be the best young shortstop in the game. He's really picked up his power. He's the best defensive shortstop in the game. Definitely top 3 defensively.
The Indians are kind of like the A's in a way.
A little bit,
Not complete philosophy, but in terms of bringing up the youth, blending them in with a smaller payroll, and it could certainly pay off for them this year.
I just heard today that Tyler Naquin, he is going to be a stud center fielder, made their 40-man roster. So I'm really happy for him.
Is he one of the guys from when you were working with... Well,
Francisco Lindor was too. Tyler Naquin, he's a great guy. He is a great contact hitter, and he said that he learned how to hit by his dad throwing rocks at a broomstick.
It's tough to do. Stick ball with
Yeah.
little rocks. Yeah.
Then you've got to remember they got Michael Brantley.
Mm-hmm.
He won the MVP a couple of years ago. Jason Kipnis.
Kluber's coming off the Cy Young, isn't he? Or did he get
No, he won it 2 years ago.
2 years ago? But
Yeah.
still, he's on the staff.
Dallas Keuchel won it last year.
Dallas Keuchel, that's
Yeah.
right.
And then they've got Mike Napoli at first base.
Knapp reuniting with Tito because
Yeah.
I think he had 1 year under Tito before Tito left.
And I mean, I wanted to get to that.
Or did he not?
No.
Or did he come in the
He
World
came in
Series year?
He came in the World Series year.
Okay, all
I
right,
wanted
so
to
it
get
wouldn't
to
be-
that about Francona. He's got that playoff pedigree. He knows how to win in the playoffs. If this team can get there, I think they can do some damage. And part of that falls back onto their roster, onto their bullpen, because they got Kluber. They've got a guy by the name of Danny Salazar, who I think is good. They've got a guy by the name of Trevor Bauer.
Bauer's good out of the bullpen, yeah.
Well, there's talk about moving him up into the rotation. We'll see. They've Cody Anderson. He turned a lot of heads last year when he came up. He was another one of the guys for the Mudcats that I talked to and got to know pretty good. And I mean, he's the model of consistency.
Where's Martinez going to play this year? Is it going to be totally at first base? Isn't that his last name? Who's their first baseman, the Indians? Knapp is, but who's the guy that started out as a catcher, but he was a switch hitter? Very similar to Victor Martinez. Might be their DH now.
Carlos Santana?
Carlos Santana. That's the singer, not the singer, but the baseball player.
Yeah.
But he's going to DH this year?
Yeah, he's going to DH
so he's
this
like
year.
kind of transitioned from catcher to first base to now DH. And he's a good hitter. He can spot Knapp at first. So.
Yeah. And then somebody to keep an eye on out of the bullpen, Jabba Chamberlain.
Oh, John.
Because there was so much
He became
built
such
around him, so much hype around
He became
him.
a story because of New York.
Yeah.
Well, let's just hope that that the Indians don't order the flies like they did when he was on the Yankees.
Yeah.
Remember, he had to swat him out of his face.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Hopefully, no flies resurrect and come after him while he's on the mound.
So I'm going with them as my sleeper World Series pick.
Wild card team or win the division.
I think they'd get in as a wild card,
But we've seen those runs.
but I'm going to go with an over-under of 86 wins.
That's a good number.
You're listening to Orange Pulp, and to wrap up the AL, we got the Minnesota Twins. They're improving, can we say? I mean, they've got Mangol Sano, who I can see in his first full year, I can see him hitting about 280, 35 home runs, over 100 RBIs, put up big numbers because he's a big-time player.
He's talked a lot in his development through the minor leagues now up to
yes.
Minnesota. So
You got Joe Mauer, who, where's he been?
I hope Joe can get on a good team. I think ever since he got transitioned to first, which was for his health,
I mean,
he didn't hit as well after
all
that
those
either.
kitchen years and catchers the knees go and everything, and he's nowhere near the MVP season he had in 2009. If he can, everything works out, hit 280, 290, and remember he took a huge salary but a huge pay cut to what he would have gotten on the open market.
Right.
But the thing is when you take the big salary in a small market, everyone looks at you going, expecting so much more, and I guess it could be a semi comeback if he gets up to 290, it's a semi comeback, and maybe if he can stay healthy, the rotation will be good, not great. I mean, there's some improvement, but I don't know. As a whole, the Twins are not one of those go-to teams as a whole, and with that, I don't see them finishing anything close to second, which is what they did last year. I think they'll finish third or fourth with 70 wins.
I think they can hit a little bit. You look at their roster, like you mentioned Sano, and we talked about Mauer. Brian Dozier's good at second base, and Trevor Plouffe they've talked a lot about on the corners.
I haven't
but
seen
you got to be able to pitch, and
Yeah.
I think, Irvin Santana, remember when he came out and he was like
I've never been a Santana
this
fan.
great,
Yeah.
great, pitcher they thought was going to be with the Angels, and then he's bombed around a little bit. If he's your ace, Phil Hughes, okay, he was kind of up and down with the Yanks.
Yankees.
But if you can't pitch,
Yeah,
that's going to be their biggest
they
problem.
It's not a fantastic starting rotation. The bullpen's even worse. Now transitioning over into the NL,
You mean the Cardinals division, the Central?
Yes, it really is. So we'll start right there with you, Tim. The St. Louis Cardinals.
Why don't we start with the Pirates? Let's start with the
Zach,
Pirates first.
Okay, you can have the Pirates.
We'll do the Cardinals last because everyone knows about the Cardinals.
Because everybody knows that they're probably
going to win.
Okay.
I had a chance to go to PNC Ballpark a couple of years
It is
ago.
a beautiful
If you don't get there, make sure it's on the bucket list because it's
phenomenal.
a great new ballpark, great
It's on the bucket
atmosphere. You know, the whole city skyline of Pittsburgh. But
Heinz
anyways,
Field right next to it.
Heinz Field down the street, exactly. So, you know, looking at the Pirates, here's another team similar to Kansas City, where although you have McCutchen, which is a big name, you pretty much got a lot of other guys that, you know, have good years but not all-star kind of years. You know, up the middle this year, they're going to move. It looks like they're going to move Harrison from third to second, and they'll have Jody Mercer at short. So you got a decent, you know, keystone positions up the middle, as they say. John Jaso at first. I mean, he was kind of one of those guys with, you know, Tampa who like would come on the roster, have a couple good weeks. I'm not certain there. You got Gregor Polanco, Starling Marte in the outfield. Those guys can hit.
I always like Gregor Polanco.
He's a solid hitter, young guy. Cervelli, you know, behind the plate. He's a gritty guy. You know, their rotation.
Word of the day from Tim: gritty.
Gritty. It's some of these baseball players. It's a good definition for them, I guess. But I think their rotation is something you really got to look at. Okay, you've got Francisco Liriano, Garrett Cole. You got John Neese, who had some decent times with the Mets. He wasn't a stud, but had some decent times. There's three.
I would not be surprised if Garrett Cole is the Cy Young winner this year.
He very well could be, and I think he was almost close to being the guy last year. And you got Ryan Vogelsong, who used to be a solid pitcher with the Giants. So they've got a good, solid rotation. And then they get to the Shark, Mark Melancon, as a closer. Now, when he was on the Red Sox that one year with Bobby Valentine, he sucked like everybody. But then once he got to the
team was awful.
The whole team was terrible.
With Valentine.
But Melancon went to Pittsburgh, and he's become this revelation in the bullpen. So I see the Pirates battling it out with the Cubs for second place.
You're listening,
and maybe 88 wins.
You're listening to Orange Pulp, and that really is a good division. I mean, how great the three teams between the Cubs, the Cardinals, and the Pirates did with 97 or more wins each. On the other side, you have the much drop down, the Cincinnati Reds. Oh, you two flipped again. I'm looking at the...
Here, I'll just do the Reds. Let me just...
Well, let's do the Milwaukee Brewers to give you a chance.
Because, I mean, you know, the Brewers are going to be as bad as the Reds are.
Yes.
So, I mean, I've got 3 words.
Okay,
DX. I've got 3 words.
I got 3 words for you.
I've got 3 words for you, for all you Brewers fans out here. They're gonna suck.
They're not good.
I mean, you look at you look at this possible.
Okay, let me give you 3 words: Miller Lite beer. That's about all you're going to get for the Brewers this year, I think.
Pirates, Cardinals, Cubs.
I mean, you look at this projected lineup for the Brewers, and through most of it, you say, "Who?" Yeah, they've still got Ryan Braun.
Who, steroids or not, is still a good hitter.
He's still a good hitter.
Yes.
But, I mean, you've got to say.
I have zero care if people use PEDs. It's not something that's ever bothered me. But how he went about it with what crap he pulled, I know it's a long time ago, but that was Lance Armstrong scummy.
Wow.
They're
not going to have Brian Armstrong Day at Miller Park.
They are
not. He is not walking through that door.
I mean, after you get past Ryan Braun, you're like, oh, this team is
not
a AAA team.
Brewers have really fallen from grace from being a playoff-style team just a handful of years back, and now they're really just a team on the schedule.
Because after you get past Ryan Braun, you get to a former Red Sox, this is possibly their second best player on the team.
Yes, I know.
Will Middlebrooks.
Yes.
Will, who's married to Jenny Dell, who was a former hot Nesson reporter, and they kept that under wraps, and it just came out that they got married, so good for them.
Yeah, but, I mean, you look at the rest of the team, and you're like, oh, you suck. This whole team sucks.
You're not going to have a Brian Armstrong.
If we have any listeners in Milwaukee, it's doubtful that Bob Euchre's listening to this right now.
What about Kristen?
We're really sorry.
Yeah. But, and then you look at their rotation.
Have the Packers. Your life should be pretty good.
Then you look at the rotation. They've got Matt Garza. He's had a couple of good years here and there.
Yeah, with the Rays. And
Here and there. Not every year. Here and there.
Yeah.
You've got Willie Peralta.
They just got second-tier pitching. I mean, it's not anything that's
Yeah.
going to wow you, but they could go on a stretch where they win maybe 9 of 10, and then everyone's like, ooh, the Brewers, and then after
then
that
they lose 19 of 20.
Then they lose 19 of 20 after that. So, yeah,
thought you
because
were
a
gonna
couple
say
weeks
they won
got,
2 of 3.
they might have a stretch where they play like the Rockies and like the Marlins, and they might, pick up 6 in a row.
The Braves,
Yeah.
the Phillies.
The Syracuse Chiefs.
Yeah, well, them too, maybe. I don't know.
Well,
yeah, that's-
AAA teams would be playing against each other. Tim, the Cincinnati Reds.
Well, when you look at the Reds depth chart, you still can see talent, right? So you still got Joey Votto, who's under a massive contract, but he's still a solid player. You got
Nobody will take that. That's
No
why
one-
he's still with the
I
Reds.
know.
He's
He-
making straight cash, homie.
He's stuck there forever. Jay Bruce has become a much more formidable hitter in right field. Billy Hamilton, one of the best leadoff guys in the game in terms of speed.
Fastest player in the game.
Fastest player. His 40 time would probably be under 3 seconds, I think. Up the middle, Brandon Phillips, Zach Cozart, still a strong team. Devin Mesoraco behind the plate. But I just, from a pitching standpoint, I see nothing. I see no guys in the bullpen that I can even recognize. Their ace of their staff is Homer Bailey, who I think he's pitched a couple no-hitters, to be honest with
I think
you.
he has, yeah.
But not a guy.
It's either no-hitter or 9 earned runs.
Right, but no guy that, you fear. And then obviously now with Chapman on the Yankees, there's not that anchor of their bullpen that they can really go to. So over-under on the Reds, God, I'm thinking that they could be probably fighting for last. I'm thinking between 70, 75 victories.
Oh, I didn't give an over-under for the Brewers, did I?
Same thing.
Yeah,
Yes, go.
somewhere along in there. It's a fight for which one
It's
of
a
those
fight for last.
can win fewer games.
And they have to play each other 19 times.
Those games are going to be awful.
Those would be some bad games.
This
bet
might be
at
the
least-
first game where there's a no-hitter in the entire game.
One of those games, I can guarantee, Reds-Brewers is going to be on ESPN someday.
That would be rough.
Like Sunday night baseball.
They love the National League on Sunday Night
They do.
Baseball. And if it's not the Cardinals, it's got to be someone else in the Central, like the Cubs or, whomever. So, yeah. Probably Cubs-Reds, like middle of August.
Sign me up for that.
And there's the segue into the Cubs,
The
Brian.
Cubs. Now,
The lovable losers.
they may be the lovable losers, but here's a fun little thing. They obviously made the playoffs last year, got knocked out in the one-game playoff.
Yay.
And not only will they win the Central Division this year, the St. Louis Cardinals division, the Cubs will win. They are going to win the World Series.
Thank you, every media outlet ever, for the last 8 years.
Chicago's pissed at you right now because you've just cursed them.
It happens. I don't know if they'll necessarily win more than 97 games like they did last year, because I also don't expect the Cardinals and the Pirates to win 100 games in 98 games. So,
But you've got to say, that team is stacked.
yes, they have such a good team, so they'll be able to avoid that one-game playoff. Now, when John Lester is your number 2 pitcher and Jake Arrieta, a no-no guy in himself, you have a very, very good front end.
Didn't
And
he
you pick
win
up
the Cy
Lack
Young?
in the offseason.
Yep.
Didn't he win the Cy Young?
Yes, he is the Cy Young winner. You have Chris Bryant, who just has stupid pop. I mean,
Didn't you hear that he's the new European transfer for some JUCO?
I did. He was at somebody's practice, and he was punking him, yeah.
Anthony Rizzo is obviously a very, very good hitter. So you have the two of them in the heart of the lineup. And the Cubs will win the World Series and prove once again why Theo Epstein is the best in the business.
Yeah, but him and Jed Hoyer are working together, and they've been together since San Diego and then Boston and now Chicago. So, but I look at, too, some of their big pickups like Jason Hayward.
Yep.
I mean, he's never lived up to the hype, but he's still really good. How about Ben Zobrist? I mean, you don't think Joe Madden had something to do with that? Let me get Zobrist back over here to play second base, and he can move to the outfield.
Let me get Zobrist over here to play all 9 positions.
Yes.
And I think some other guys, too, who I'm not as familiar with their career, but I look at like Addison Russell, who they've talked a lot about bringing him up, and he's a shortstop, which is probably why, Castro signed with the Yankees, because he knew his time was up in Chicago.
And then what about Schwarzer, or the catcher?
Oh, Schwarber, Kyle Schwarber, he's in left. The catcher's Miguel Montero.
That's
and
right.
Then
And this comes
Jorge
to the nameless
Soler.
section of the Cubs.
Soler.
Soler, yeah. So I mean, this could be the year for the Cubs.
Yep, I'm going to put their over-under at 96 wins.
Wow.
One less than they had last year. They had 97 last year.
I know, but still.
And
an over-under of 96?
Yes. And so I'll put it at 96 because you got to figure 100 wins for the Cardinals and 98 wins for the Pirates. It's very unlikely for both of them to happen again. So you're playing each other so many times, you're still going to pick up those wins. And the bottom of the division is just so putrid that it's going to work in that area. Now, for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah, so you've got Albert Pujols, and he might as well still be on the team because this team is still, I mean, arguably the best in baseball.
Yadier Molina.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Yachty.
Matt Holliday.
Let me give you a little bit of man love to Yachty right here because he's one of my favorite players to watch. Just because, I mean, he can call a game from behind the plate. He's one of the few catchers that you can watch the entire game, and he never looks over to the third base coach to see what pitch should be thrown. He's always calling it.
Mm-hmm. And when he's healthy, can hit, too.
I was going to say, as long as he's not getting hurt.
As long as he's not breaking his thumbs, he's fine.
Or getting hurt celebrating.
But, yeah, they've got Matt Holliday. Still got a lot of pop in that bat. Johnny Peralta.
Peralta's going to be out for a little bit, though, and they just picked up Ruben Tejada from the Mets.
Because
they
that's
waived
right.
they waived Tejada, and he got signed by the Cardinals to fill in for a little bit.
I heard about that. And you've got maybe the most underrated player in all of baseball in Matt Carpenter.
Carpenter's pretty good.
He's a great defensive player.
Except in the world.
Did I say he's at third?
He might be at short this year though because Peralta. I think they were going to do some shifting maybe with those guys. I don't know what it has listed there, but
yeah. But
and then the rest of the team is the call-ups from the Memphis Redbirds that just seem to plug right in.
Yeah, and it's
do
like they're
whatever
always
they need.
ready. They are always ready.
Let's be honest. The St. Louis Cardinals are one of the best run organizations out there. They are the Spurs of the MLB.
And then I'm looking at their rotation, and I say, well, that's a win. That's a win. That's a win. That's a win. I mean, they've got Adam Wainwright. He's going to win 18 games.
My favorite name, Waka Waka.
Michael Wacha.
He's going to win 18 games. You got Mike Leake coming over from the Reds. He's going to win, on a good team, he's going to win 15.
There's a little concern with Wainwright just after the injury last year, but he did come back at the end of the season and pitch when a lot of people said he shouldn't have. So if he's in any good health, they've got the ace that anchors the rest of the staff. So
they've got Jaime Garcia and Carlos Martinez, which he's a flamethrower, and if he can get his pitches under control, he's going to be great.
Kind of a young Pedro with not as much skill yet. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm going to go with the over under for the Cardinals at 163. 100. No, I mean you've got to expect them to win at least 95 games.
Yeah.
You're listening to Orange Pulp, and we'll have a little disagreement between whether it's the Cardinals division to win or the Cubs. Either way, we expect both of those teams to make it to the playoffs. Coming up next, just a smorgasbord of NFL talk. You're listening to Orange Pulp. Welcome back to Orange Pulp. First, we'll kick it off with
We'll kick it off.
Yes, the place where...
Let's move it back 15 yards.
Which, that rule makes zero sense to me. We'll start with the new NFL rules, and just what rule stands out to you?
All of them. To be honest, a lot of them, you've got to look at the no chop blocks.
No chop blocks.
Yeah.
The big thing with
which
that
I think is that's long overdue.
Yes, and the thing is, it's not getting rule of cutting. It's the chop block thinking, oh, you can't cut low. No, it's most of the rules of chop blocks are already done or have already been made illegal. It's just making them all illegal. Chop block is different than cutting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then the kickoff, because I mean now it's just like, why are you doing it?
Yes.
Well, isn't it now if you kick it out of bounds, they get it at the 25 or something like that? I mean, 5 yards could make a big difference, maybe not.
It happened in college football, and the only question I have is: is kickers gonna try to kick it short to get it to land it like say inside the 5, and then them running it out, which will cause more kickoffs to happen and possibly cause more injuries, which this rule almost seems to go in spite of all the rules that they've done for health. And I've always argued on the side of NFL, hey, you've got lawsuits coming your way because everyone wants to get their money. I err on the side of caution, on the side of health. This almost looks like it could create more injuries.
I thought the same thing when I first heard it, but I think that it's going to be, considering where the kickers have to kick off from.
Mm-hmm.
They're still going to sail it out of bounds.
Just send it to the 25.
Goodell's an idiot. Let's just put it out there.
No,
I don't care what
no.
anybody says. He's
Goodell-
an idiot when it comes to everything, and he's a puppet for.
No,
for
we're
the
getting
owners.
into this on this then.
Oh, wow.
No, I'm sick and tired.
Oh, wow.
I am not the.
It's
pro-
not even on the Patriots side. It's just his whole regime.
I'm not
and
a
everything.
pro Goodell guy. I'm not a Goodell is he made a botchery of the Ray Rice thing.
of everything.
Every ruling that he has ever made.
It's a botch.
Has he not turned the business? Okay, first of all, we've had the conversation before. What executive do you like? There's no commissioner that
Gary
anyone's
Bettman.
Yeah, I do.
There's commissioner. Okay,
Adam
as a general
Silver's
rule.
a good commissioner.
He's a new one. So
He's a new one.
and I like Adam.
You know
Silver
what?
'cause he's in,
Even in the first couple months, I like Rob Manfred already. I didn't hate Bud Selig, but I like Rob Manfred.
People didn't hate Roger Goodell when he first came because he made all those rules where people were just getting arrested all the time. Think of how many times Pac-Man Jones' name
I like
came
Gary
up.
Bettman.
The NHL doesn't like Gary Bettman, so I'm glad one person does. Gary, you got a fan out there, and it's Zach Francis. Fan
And
of
the
the
thing
Carolina
is he
Hurricanes.
went from a brilliant businessman to not being able to tie his shoes in the eyes of court of public opinion. Yes, okay, there is plenty of negative things to say about Goodell, but clearly he's not an idiot.
Let's take this rule then, okay? So we're doing all this research as the NFL, then we're going to back out, then we're going to jump back in about concussions and everything like that. So like you just said, why would you approve a rule that could potentially, we're not saying it's a guarantee.
Is he the only one making this decision?
He's not.
No,
He's not,
A lot
but
of
I-
people
but he-
are, who are former players as well.
But he also, too, is a tail between his legs guy. Collect the money, do what everybody tells you to do. Never be a leader
He doesn't
and get out
work
in front
for the
of some.
players. He works
Works
for
for
the
the
owners. And the
So-
owners love him.
So he maybe should step up to some of these owners. Like, how about when Jerry Jones says, "Well, I mean, I know he's backtracked now,
Jerry
but there's
Jones
no
was an idiot.
there's
What
no
Jerry Jones
correlation."
says is an idiot.
But these are the guys that he's listening to. These are the people who, with the power, he is allowing to
What
make the
Jerry
decisions.
Jones said was idiotic.
It
He's not an
was.
idiot. What he said was idiotic.
100%.
And
What particular thing are you talking about?
the concussions.
Where he said there's
no
no connection with CTE. So
But the thing
Because
is,
I think that half the time when Jerry Jones opens his mouth, that there's going to be some sort of nonsense spewing out. So
well, the longer he talks, the more idiotic he comes out, i.e. Greg Hardy.
a great event at WrestleMania this weekend could have been Jerry Jones versus Vince McMahon. I mean, it's
weekend.
in his stadium. Yeah, next weekend.
there was
So
some sort of talk about that maybe.
that would have been
happening.
great.
Yeah.
But to get back on Goodell, the thing with this is his job is to take all the dings for the NFL, to be basically the punching bag. And if we take away his autonomy power, if we take away the punishing, are we going to be happy with him all of a sudden? No. Was the chasing for the Patriots with the deflated footballs in some misguided attempt to try to get back public favor because it was the Patriots? Yes, it was a messed up system. But to turn him into a laughing bag and this person who knows nothing when he started off as this well-respected, well-liked, and I believe unanimously voted by the owners.
By the owners, though, that's what we keep going back to.
That's who he works to, is for the owners.
Right.
He doesn't work for the players. He works for the owners.
But there's very few commissioners that carry themselves like that.
Bring back Taglaboo.
They just they almost readily admit that they work for the owners. You know, I don't think you'd hear that out of Adam Silver's mouth, and I think that's why you find the other leagues have better relationships
the
with
players
ownership.
in the NBA have a horrible relationship with
Well,
the
not
NBA.
anymore because
And
they know that the big media contracts coming in and that they're going to be getting loads upon loads of money. So I
Yes,
think that'll work
but
to their
long
favor.
term, the way they restructured that contract with the NBA lockout, the players got screwed, for lack of a better
Well,
word.
they also had a horrible leader in Billy King and Derek Fisher. So when Fisher was
not arguing on
you
that.
know, being promiscuous with teammates'
Which
girlfriends
how
and
that
stuff
went
like
down.
that. You know,
Matt
he should
Barnes
have
is
been
insane.
faking. He should have been paying more attention to the labor negotiations. But I just think that you can't, in one aspect of your mouth, you cannot be saying, oh, we're trying to protect this, we're trying to do this. And then, as you were saying earlier, now put in a rule that almost flies in the face of that.
It does.
I think when you contradict yourself publicly, that's what's going to make people have the remarks that I have.
He's not the only person who makes the decisions on that. And my big thing is, like I said, what commissioner do, as a general whole, people like? The answer is none once they've been there for more than a couple of years. Getting off the Roger Goodell thing, because obviously we're never going to agree on it.
I think we partially agree. I think we have segments of agreement. Don't thrive on the
You agree on how to say his name. That's about it.
Okay, Robert Griffin III to the Browns. Zach,
it makes sense. It makes sense. An overrated player to the worst team in football.
The Redskins are one of the most dysfunctional organizations. The Browns are the most dysfunctional.
I mean, like I said, one of the most overrated players I've ever seen coming out of college football to the team that it just makes sense that he would have gone to it. You knew that either him or Kaepernick was going there. It was just a matter of which one.
Kaepernick is still under contract, so it's...
Yeah, so I mean, like the Browns, I will say the Browns were smart because they could pay RG3 whatever they wanted to.
He just needs a fresh start. I mean, we hear all these negative stories about him. I don't know if they're true. Some of them may be very true. Some of them may not be true at all. But I will say one thing. When the Redskins made their run last year to the wild card with Kirk Cousins, after it was named that he was a starter, you didn't hear a peep from Robert Griffin the entire year.
Yep,
so maybe he grew up a little bit in whatever negativity he was bringing to things, and now it can only go up with the Browns. The Browns can go no lower than they are. I mean,
they could go 0-16.
Zach, question for you on this. What does this affect with their draft pick being number 2 overall? Are they going to still draft a quarterback? How does that dynamic work?
I have no idea what they're going to do with that. Because, I mean, I think it sort of depends on who the Titans take.
Well, they're not taking a quarterback, obviously.
Right. They're obviously not going to take a quarterback.
They're happy with
and
Mariota.
I sort of think that I think what you're going to see now is that they take like a linebacker, wide receiver, defensive end,
Bosa,
something like
or
that.
Offensive lineman I'm blanking on his name, from Missouri.
I think that Bosa is going to be number 1, so he's going to be off the board. But you're going to see them take some other position of need, and then 3rd, 4th, 5th round, that's where they take a quarterback. Take Connor Cook, for example. Yeah.
The other question I have...
Which, I mean, if I'm Connor Cook, I'm saying anybody but the Browns. Not the Browns. Please. No, hey, Cleveland.
Quarterbacks do tend to be the place, or Cleveland does tend to be the place where quarterbacks go to die. I mean, let's be honest, Jeff Garcia and Trent Dilfer are their good quarterbacks who we place them in other franchises.
Derek Anderson has been really good as the backup to the Panthers.
Tim, do you think Robert Griffin III can succeed in Cleveland's offense?
I think there are certain guys, and this is true in college basketball too, that are great college players but maybe not great pro players. However, there's a little talent there in Cleveland. I mean, it's not talent like playoff talent, but if some of these guys go in with, Griffin himself, they've got nothing to lose. Absolutely nothing to lose. And with a new coach and a fresh voice and sort of a different outlook on things, there are certain organizations that are always hapless. But I think Griffin could do well. But what does well mean? Does it mean Pro Bowl well, or does it mean win a few games well? I think it might just mean, he's a serviceable player. And
Tim, have you ever decided to be a politician? Because that was the easiest way to not answer my question.
Well, I've been following politics a lot, so I've learned how to not answer questions.
I think something that Tim said there sort of struck me. Because they've got a new coach, Hugh Jackson.
Yes.
To borrow a phrase from new WWE Hall of Fame inductee, we're climbing aboard the Hugh train instead of the Ho train from The Godfather.
The Godfather.
So, but yeah, everybody seems to love this guy.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think that I don't know how he's going to do as a head coach, obviously, but I think he could go a long way in turning Cleveland around.
RG3 is definitely one of those here or here guys. You throw it here or you throw it here. You don't go through reading through the offense. And that first year with Rookie of the Year success, obviously good structured family background. You have Rookie of the Year. You had that great season, and then he wanted to try to become a different quarterback and wanted to try to not be the running. It depends on also what RG3 is going to do as well. Talking now, Michael Sam, which I assume you guys have heard. The
Rams drafted him to get off of Hard Knocks. Yeah.
My theory when it first happened was when they had 4 7th-round draft picks and they took him third when their fourth draft pick of the 7th round was the very next pick. I went, the NFL kind of talked and said, hey, we're not letting this guy fall out. But Michael Sam's an interesting story case because obviously he's the first openly gay player. But do you think something like that happened?
Well, going back to the Goodell's an idiot, I'll always go to that, but I don't really know. And
why is this a case where Goodell's an idiot?
No, I'm not saying I really believe that. I'm just throwing it into that category for fun, for like a joke.
I get that, but
I'm not on that part of the argument at all. I just said that for the sake of saying it. I'm saying that Michael Sam was one of the co-defensive players of the SEC. I don't know what that means. You'd have to look at that year, see who the teams were, see what his statistics were. Where he was drafted in the 7th round was a decision made by a team that's where they felt he should be. I think what hurt Michael Sam post this situation is when he went into the CFL and he was with Montreal and it was like he signed and then he was there and then back and forth. That would be where the only credibility factor for me I would have towards Michael Sam. But at that point, he had high accolades coming out before he even mentioned of his sexuality. So
something that you said about RG3. There are some guys that are good college players that are not good pros.
Do you know who was the offensive player in the SEC, the best defensive conference? Tim Tebow was.
That's what they said that year. Just in general.
Just in general, but he had also made it. And the co-defensive player of the year, if you look at his stats inside of there, it's him beating up on a bunch of lesser competition to accumulate those stats. Let's quickly go through his NFL Combine. 4.91, which is not good, especially as an edge rusher. Only 17 reps on the bench press. Only just over 25 inches in his vertical. Broad jump, 114 inches, but 3 cone drills, 7.8 seconds, and 20-yard shuttle, 4.7. None of those numbers are all putrid, and a lot of those were just
putrid.
Just the big thing here is grading scale on a 1 to 10. He got a 5. Here's the thing: there's so many weaknesses of the game. He was a late bloomer. He couldn't go, and the Rams were trying to have a pass rusher. Didn't work. They cut him. The Cowboys were in desperate need of a pass rusher. They tried signing him on the practice team. That didn't work out. Do you know how much, if a team signed and then could play the first openly gay player, they would be universally applauded in public perception, and they would just get endless positive PR, and that almost makes it harder to cut someone. He just couldn't do it at the top level of the NFL.
Didn't Michael Sam, though, go to the last cuts with the Rams?
Yes.
Whether that was whatever, I don't even know what the move was or not. But I mean, he almost made the team.
So he doesn't make a team, and it's okay. He's just not good enough to play in the NFL. And then the question was, he wanted to be on the Oprah Winfrey Network for his reality show before he even made the team, and then he got so much backlash on that he decided to taper it off. He's just not good enough to make it in the NFL. Now, as for the Jeff Fisher, he adamantly denies it, and the Rams, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. It would have been, hey, we're not going to make this mistake. Not with all the negative PR we're taking. We're not letting this guy fall out of the draft. But
if that's real, though, too, if in fact enough investigation is done where that is real,
which I don't know that you can do that investigation.
I'm not reporting it or anything like that. It was my opinion when it happened, and this kind of just backs it up. I just think it did happen.
But that's significant blood on the hands of the NFL because
I don't think that's a bad thing.
That's like it's like discriminating without discriminating is really what it is. And
did you really want it? There's a thing called good business, and there's certain times where the negative PR hit of someone dropping all the way out of the draft with all of those picks and saying, hey, you have 4 picks, take it with your third. They had other defensive linemen.
But here's another thing, too. Again, and this is where sports journalism has gotten to, just like regular journalism. do we really need to know this? I mean, is this really a story? Is this a necessity story? And is this a story that's going to have great legs for a long period of time?
I don't think it's going to have great legs, but I think
why do we need to know this?
Why do we need to know anything then? Why do we need to know the Steph Curry versus in the Nike pitch? If we don't need to know something like this is what the 24-hour news blotter is.
Well, I understand that, but that's what I'm saying. I think this is one of those things that when you have a story like this and you open up this box, right? There's so many more issues that surround this situation.
That's what part of this industry is.
I know, and it's maybe a negative part of the industry.
So if I'm an owner or a head coach of an NFL team, I'm going to do whatever I can to get off of Hard Knocks because that's a distraction. So, I mean, yeah, sure, if the NFL says to the Rams, take Michael Sam or you're going on Hard Knocks. Yeah, you're damn right I'm taking Michael Sam.
And if you take Michael Sam and it works out in your favor, do you know how much just universal applause you're having? Think if he was a good pass rusher. The Cardinals desperately needed one. They went and got Dwight Freeney out of retirement, basically, because they needed some type of pass rusher. That's why they went and traded for Jones from the Patriots. But
Syracuse grad Chandler Jones.
Yes.
Syracuse grad Dwight Freeney.
That's true. That's true.
So they're trying to get pass rush in the NFL. You would just all of the public, all the positive PR, all the great things, merchandise would go selling like crazy. You would have all of these positive stories, and he still couldn't make a roster. I don't begrudge him for thinking that he didn't make the NFL because he's gay, because every person who's made it to that top level has it wired in their mind, I'm good enough to do it. But in the reality of the matter, he just wasn't good enough. Coming up next, how Nike messed up in a big, big way, and Under Armour is benefiting in huge monetary value.
That's right, Breon.
Orange Pulp. You're listening to Orange Pulp now. Nike had a pitch to Stephen Curry or Kevin Durant or a lot of other things where they butchered this from A to Z. What do you make of the Nike situation?
I just think it's funny, and I also think, too, that Curry has been beyond amazing the last 2 years. And been rising ever since he was drafted, right?
The only thing that seemed to slow him down was his injury with his ankles.
That's right. So, but when this pitch happened, I'm not saying Nike went about it right. Obviously, they went about it completely poorly. He was looking to sign with somebody. He was probably wearing Nikes at the time, but he wasn't like officially signed long term.
He already had Nike. Nike could have matched.
And they probably had him maybe on their depth chart lower than where he currently is right now.
I mean, let's be honest, they have Jordan.
This is an after the fact story where it's like, haha, you didn't value this guy enough. But in a sort of unrelated way, this could be one of the best things for the new set of sneaker wars, because now Curry's in on the Under Armour side, and we don't see Adidas and Reebok in the sneaker wars like they used to be years ago. They fell off. Nike needs some competition. So it's kind of poetic justice that this happened, and now the best player in the game is not with Nike.
I agree with my esteemed colleague, Timothy Ferguson. Zach, what's your thoughts on it?
Is that a record? Because you like to disagree with me.
That's why I wanted to say it.
I don't like it, but you like to. So
I agree with my esteemed colleague, Timothy Ferguson.
I mean, I agree with Tim. It's like one of those funny, Nike, you messed up.
No one knew what it was going to be.
Yeah. I mean, it was a funny story for a day, but now you look at it and you're like, oh, well, Stephen Curry, he's still going to win the MVP. He's still going to score 30 points a game. Warriors are still going to win 73 games.
74 is what I said.
And now
I think I said 74 too. I think we agreed on that as well, Brian. And now so I think you better start keeping the agreement tally, and it's larger than you think it is.
And now Steph is going to make hundreds of millions of dollars for Under Armour.
I agree.
And you know who else is with Under Armour? The greatest living American, Thomas
in the world.
Brady.
Well, that's another thing we agree on. Tom Brady.
That's right.
I agree
think
with
about
my esteemed
that.
colleague, Tim Ferguson.
Think about that. You've got the best player in football, arguably, in my opinion, but I know there's other better players. You've got the best player in basketball. You've got the best player in golf, arguably. Who does...
Spieth.
Yes. Under Armour, do they also have Bryce Harper, too?
I don't know.
I'm not sure if they have him or not. We'd have to look
Way to
that
go!
one up.
Way to dive too deep.
But Harper's kind of like, even there with Mike Trout, right? And then hockey, there's no Under Armour presence. But in the four out of the 5, I guess, major sports, soccer would be below probably those 5. They got the top
I was going to
names.
say soccer, Nike
and
has.
Giselle, the top name in modeling. I mean, Under Armour's doing. She had the contract with Under Armour before Tom Brady did, so she brought Brady to Under Armour.
Nike,
I mean, really, Nike.
Giselle could bring me to different things.
Giselle could bring me to any shoe company.
Soccer, Nike has Cristiano Ronaldo and a whole plethora of names. Adidas has Lionel Messi. So.
Well, Adidas still has big names in soccer, but not so much in these other sports. They're so. Yeah, we'd have to find out if Harper's with.
I think Bryce Harper is, because when I typed in UN, Under Armour popped up with Bryce Harper.
Then there you go. So, and he was the NL MVP last year, so they're doing good. They're doing good.
Coming up next, Tim's Takes, Zach zeroing in, and the BA moment. You're listening to Orange Pulp. You're listening to Orange Pulp, and now it's time for Tim's Takes.
Well, we already talked about UAlbany earlier, so I don't really have to talk too much about them. But I'm again just very glad for the program. They were able to get their first win, and I would think that it's not going to be too much longer that Coach Abe could potentially move on to a bigger job. 5 consecutive America East Conference titles. I don't think there's too many teams other than the top programs that go to the tournament 5 years in a row. I mean, sometimes you just don't make it one of those years. So she's been amazing there. And
so Tim, I've got to say, I think that you were the problem when you were on the staff.
As a grad assistant, maybe I did a shitty job with Film Exchange. I don't know what it was.
We just got that orange dropped in there.
It's all right. It's a podcast. It's a podcast. So, but what I wanted to talk about, which is one of those obscure things that I noticed, and I did read up a little bit on it, is this year's courts for the NCAA tournament. Apparently, there is some concept that the courts move on just like the teams move on. So if you've been paying attention to the baselines, they will say the new round each time they go to the next level. So tonight we'll still see the Sweet 16 on the baseline, but the next night we'll see the Elite 8. They've also gone back to calling the first and second rounds.
Which is the best thing.
Which is great, and the women got to stop calling the regional city name, which the men did for a while, and go back to just East, West, whatever the case may be. But I do have to say that logo last night for the regionals in the middle of the court was one of their best logos that I've seen in a long time. I hate the white key. I think that's really hard as a player to know whether you're in the lane or not in the lane. I like a darker key. But it's just nice to see they've actually got a little bit of something right, because those other courts were so blah, and they've branded every damn thing from the ball to the cup that you have to drink out of to everything. But that regional logo is cool, and I hope that the Final Four logo will be interesting as well. And then I'm just going to tease next week. So I'm going to talk about an athletic department in northern New York, a Division III athletic department, whose basketball teams had a combined record of 2-48 this year. And the men's team finished on a 18-game losing streak, and the women's team finished their season on a 22-game losing streak. And also, to my knowledge, neither program won a home game.
And if that tease doesn't get you to listen to next week's Orange Pulp, nothing will. Zach, what do you got for Zach zeroing in?
So, staying on the basketball theme, I'm going to talk a little bit about the new entry rules for the NBA draft and how a couple of teams, in my eyes, are abusing them. So, the new entry rules, basically you can stay in, you can declare for the draft, still don't have to hire an agent for a certain period of time, but now you have until 10 days after the NBA Combine to take your name out and go back to college. And I need to thank one of my good friends from North Carolina State, Kyle Bullins, for this. KBZ, I know that you're listening to this, so thank you. But
thank you for the listenership.
Yeah, thank you, listener.
That's for the listener to decide.
Yay! But so, I mean, you've got to think about Kentucky, where John Calipari says, "Yeah, everybody's entering the draft, including the walk-ons." I'm sorry. The walk-ons aren't going to get drafted. They're not staying.
Cal's so political, isn't he? He should run as someone's running mate in one of the parties.
I actually heard somebody say that the other day.
Maybe not Trump, but maybe like Hillary or something like that.
But I mean, then
Could you imagine Calipari and Trump as a running team?
I mean, Cal is like the best recruiter. He could get the House and the Senate to agree on anything.
I'm building the wall, probably.
We're gonna build it.
That's how he's doing it. That's how Trump's going to get Mexico to pay for it.
Yeah.
Not that he's gonna political
put
statement.
basketball hoops all along the wall, and then Cal can recruit. I mean, there's some top talent in Mexico. He can recruit the talent that way.
Just light up all of the traditional Kentucky big men.
So, but I mean, it's just sort of like one of those things, Cal. I get that you're trying to get the best advice for your players. And there are several, yes, because this is how you run your program, there's going to be a lot of them that stay in the draft. But you're going to bring most of that team back. And then, just from a personal standpoint, NC State's getting shafted this year because of an awful year, but a couple of their players, Cat Barber, he's already signed with an agent. He's staying in the NBA draft. He's gone. He's a projected second
After
rounder.
you said Cat Dog now, I always want him to be Cat Dog Barber.
Cat Dog Barber.
I don't know why, I just do.
And Malik Abdul-Abu, he just declared today that he's going to declare for the draft, but he's not signing with an agent, so that's good. Abu can come back. And just yesterday, both Caleb and Cody Martin said that they're going to transfer from NC State.
Really?
Yeah. The Martin twins are gone. Apparently Georgetown is showing a lot of interest in them.
Mark Godfrey is gone, isn't he?
If we have another bad year, yeah. The Godfather's gone.
Jesus.
So, yeah, just a little bit of insight there on the NBA, on the draft rules. I like the draft rules as they stand now, where you get more time to decide if you want to stay in. But I think that you can really over-abuse them, and I think that's what Coach Cal has done.
You're listening to Orange Pulp, and that was Zach zeroing in, and now it's time for the BA moment.
The BA moment!
Now, we're going to talk about a topic I don't think we've ever talked about on the show before.
Boxing.
No. Wrestling. And not pro wrestling. Collegiate wrestling.
Cornell's dominance at the... Are we going to talk about that?
Cornell did not dominate.
They won a couple matches,
Yes,
didn't
we
they?
will. There is a Cornell wrestler who will be in the conversation.
Okay.
Penn State dominated. Penn State won their 5th national title in the last 6 years. They have Cal Sanderson, who is the best wrestler of all time. Most people agree upon that. It's either him or Dan Gable. But Sanderson actually never lost and won national title after national title. Penn State had Nico Megaludis and Zane Rutherford. Rutherford's one wrestler I want to focus on because he won his title and he's viewed as the best wrestler at 149, and he has separated him so far from everybody else. It's not even close. The guy that he beat, Spencer, is viewed as the second best wrestler, and then there's a massive drop off between them at the 149 weight. And Spencer scored 1 point in 14 minutes of wrestling through the 3 times that they matched
Brian,
up.
can you explain the points? I know there's like a green wristband and a red wristband,
Okay.
and those go up. And is
One
it
team
greens
is-
for a point, red for a takeaway
No,
of a point?
one team is green, one team is
Okay,
red.
right. Okay.
So that's why you separate the 2 teams. So
And
say
you
and
raise your
face them.
hand, and
the
that
ref
determines the
and
points.
the ref goes take. You get 2 for a takedown, 1 for escape, 2 for a reverse, and then there's back points where if you put a person on their back for so many seconds, there's certain points in there. 5 seconds, there's more points, so it's based on there. You pin them, and then that's how it goes. And then decisions within that. If you win by a couple points, that's just a small decision,
And then-
or just a decision.
And then negative points for ringworm, right?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but
More
that's
points.
a terrible
What about for
byproduct
cauliflower
of
ear?
wrestling.
Yes, cauliflower. There's actually a kid here, undergrad program, that I saw and looked at him and went to do his IFB. I looked and said, "You wrestled for years, didn't you?" He goes, "Yeah, how'd you know?" I went,
Some
"I'm
of
trying
these-
to get your IFB in."
Some of these dudes can't, like, it's almost
It slits,
closed
yes.
completely,
Yes.
and they
Look at
still wear
Brock
the
Lesnar's
headgear,
ear.
too.
Yes, but now back onto the actual. There's Rutherford, where why I want to focus on him is he redshirted last year, so he wrestled independently, internationally. And a Russian, he beat him so badly, and he's just this calm, cool, and he just easily beat him, no problem. The Russian swung and punched him, and when he was asked about it, he went, "Oh, he just must have not liked the way I was wrestling and beating him." Like, he's just this calm, cool, collect guy. He wins the national title, and it just looks like he just won a regular dual meet. He gets his hand raised, wins the national title in front of all the people, goes over, hugs his family, talks, goes, nice interview, calm, walks over to a little kid who just happens to be there, unsnaps his headgear and just hands it to him and shakes the kid's hand and walks down. If I just won my first national title, do you know what I'm not doing? Giving away my headgear. That's enshrined for the rest. Thing is he's a redshirt sophomore, so he's probably figuring, well, I'm going to win 2 more of these.
Thing is, that headgear is gross, by the way, too. That poor kid.
Oh, that kid is lucky.
Don't they take their shoes off sometimes, or is that only the Olympics? Like if
shoes, during their
isn't that like a respect thing when your career ends or something like that? You take your shoes off.
That I don't know.
Okay.
You know who almost won his 3rd national title in the heavyweight division?
We were going to get there with the NC State man, but he choked at the end. Snyder just shot, and he never should have given up that shot, and then lost easily in overtime in sudden death. But
he'd won 2 national titles.
Yes, he's won, and then had at the time had the longest current active winning streak.
So Brian, I don't know if you listened to it. Say his name.
I can't pronounce it, and that's
okay. I'll say it for you.
I'm gonna try again. 1 second. Let me pull it up because I know it's the ghetto would ask in something, but I sounded it out last time, and I had listened to it 4 different times to try to get it. And Gwiazdowski.
You're close.
Yeah.
Gwiazdowski.
I had tried, and kid's a stud, but Schneider was on that night. Now, the person I want to talk about is Cornell's Gabe Dean, and this one is a special moment. When he won the national title, he ran up to his family, just gives a giant, giant bear hug to his brother, and the broadcaster just completely laid out as everyone's just standing and applauding. He takes small step away. His brother's going to be coming to Cornell to be wrestling. Then he goes over and just bear hugs his mom. And he was one of 2 wrestlers to win a national title. And Cornell obviously having great wrestlers with the only 4-time national champion at 4 different weight classes as a true freshman, true sophomore, true junior, senior, etc. Kyle Dake, who will be wrestling in the Olympics, and he's training. Wrestling is a sport that I was never very good at, but I love watching it. And yes, it's always going to be overshadowed because it's the exact same time as March Madness. But if you ever get the chance to watch the elite of the elite at the collegiate level or the Olympic level, it's something that's fantastic to watch. And I really, really hope it gets reinstated to the Olympics.
And I'm not making a joke out of amateur wrestling, but a lot of good amateur wrestlers get recruited by the WWE to become professional wrestlers.
And then the best wrestlers end up going to the Olympics or MMA.
Right.
And you see it and you look and you just see national titles. And as for Penn State as a team, their kids, they only graduate like 1 top player. I mean, they graduate a lot of wrestlers, but their core nucleus is still young. And they're going to have a lot of national power to go in the future. For Zach Francis, Tim Ferguson, I'm Brian Armstrong.
I just thought that was the only way we could finish.
That was Tim Ferguson. This is Orange Pulp.